Thank you guys for joining. We're excited to have Ted with us tonight, and we're going to pick his brain a little bit. So, Ted, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Ted Minnis. I'm the Friends of Harvard water polo coach for the men and women here at Harvard University. I'm in my 16th season. I'm in my 36th season overall coaching. From the Bay Area in California, from Menlo Park. Played a little high school water polo and started coaching in 1990. I coached at my alma mater, and then I started coaching at the Stanford Club under John Tanner through ODP system, and kind of worked my way up. And for some reason, Bob Scalise thought 16 years ago it was smart to hire a high school coach with no college experience to coach two college teams, and here we are.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's been worked out all right for you so far.
Yeah, I can't complain, I guess.
Good. Uh, well, tell us a little bit about that. How was you started at high school, you jumped to college. What was that transition like? Was it a big
Yeah,
learning curve?
oh, a big learning curve. I think, when I was coaching my high school team and coaching club at Stanford, and, we had some success. I was, consistently in the semifinals of our section, and, we were competing for medals at Stanford Club at the age groups. And, I always said, I run my program like a college program. And then I got to college, I was like, whoa, I did not run it like a college program at all. It's just so different. The speed of the game was the first thing I noticed. I come in and I'm coaching men, and it's 30 meters, and back then, and just the speed and the strength of the game was way different, and I was trying to keep up with it in my mind at first, so that was a big adjustment. But I think that once I think for me, a growth mindset is always huge, and I'm always willing to change and adapt and listen. I think that's a big part of my coaching style. And so I think that, once I figured out how to do things at Harvard and do things, that were the Harvard way to be successful, we started to have some success.
That's awesome. I know right now a hot topic between, I guess, probably always is, but college water polo is like recruiting. How do you recruit? Do you have any, or how do you recruit for Harvard? Like, how does that work? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think recruiting is probably what I spend the most time in my day on, is recruiting. I think for me, it starts, there's academic requirements for us. And so, we're going to spend some time. My assistants are always recruiting the class below. So they're going to be recruiting that rising junior class. June 15th, they'll start contacting everyone that emailed us, and people that we've seen out, recruiting, hearing from club coaches and stuff. And I'll be working the class above, and we'll go out. I spend a lot of time on the road in the summer, and we'll be out evaluating, gathering the academic information. And then I spend a lot of time getting to know the kids that I'm recruiting. I think culture and the locker room are a huge part of, being able to have some success, especially, in the last 5-6 years. I think, that's really come to the forefront is what your team culture is like. And so I think that's really important. And I always talk about, in the recruiting process, it's about, being prepared for the next 40 years of your life. It's not the 4 years that you're here. And I have to be just as big of a fit water polo wise, and the school has to be a fit as you do for us. And we're building, as corny as it sounds, we're building a family here, and we talk a lot about family. I think if you asked any of my athletes then what our culture was built on, they would all say family. We're all from somewhere other than Boston. There's not a lot of water polo here in Boston, except down the street at MIT, and, maybe an hour down south in Providence, and, little pockets of club, but, with BC and BU and Northeastern, but it's not a big hotbed of water polo. So we're from all over the place. So this is all we got.
That's awesome. I'm sure that creates a tight knit community. nice at least having each other.
Yeah, yeah. I think everything we do with the men and the women. I think that's an important piece if we're doing recruiting trips or junior weekends or, any of that. When we do our community work or, any kind of event that we're doing, everything is with the men and the women. I think that's, those are the brothers and sisters. And, I love both my children equally. So.
That's awesome. Have you found you're a West Coast native, so how was that transition to the East Coast for you?
It was cold in the winter. It snowed. I think those. I've really enjoyed living in Boston. I love athletics and sports, and it's a sports crazy town. I am not a Celtics fan. I'm not a Patriots fan. Or a Red Sox fan. But I love being able to go and watch those teams, and I still am a big Bay Area fan. But when it's all said and done, I'm going to retire back in California. I think I can't see. I understand snowbirds and going to Florida now when you live here. Look out my window and there's 3-foot snowbanks right now, and it's been 40 degrees and melting, and there's still that much snow. So.
For sure, you'll have earned the warm weather by the time that you make it back.
Yeah, I still got 10 to 12 years left in me for sure. So still loving what I'm doing. So
good. Well, that's a good thing. I'm just going to put it out. If anyone ever has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to jump in. Want this to be able to, anyone is welcome to jump in and ask questions. Give a minute, see if anyone does. But if not, let's jump in and kind of talk about, your gameplay, your strategy. How did you start coaching? Was there something that go directly from player to coaching?
Yeah, I started coaching just sports in general at a very young age. I think I coached my first, I think it was a flag football team that one of my little brothers was playing on when I was in high school, 16 years old. I coached a lot of basketball. I think, my dream and my goal was to be a college basketball coach, but I wasn't good enough to do that. I was I guess a little better water polo coach. But I think, I've been very lucky to have mentors along the way that have helped me and kind of helped, mold and who I am as a coach and what my whys are when I'm coaching and what my values are. It started when I was 16 and a basketball coach, PE teacher, Stan Drake, kind of pulled me aside and had me come work with him. And, I watched how he always had a smile on his face and he cared so much about his athletes and really wanted to see us succeed, not as athletes, but as people, and taught us lessons about being good young men and women. And so I think that was the first big mentor I had that kind of shaped who I was as a coach. And then John Tanner is a huge influence on me. I remember my first practice with him and I walked out and I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. And he's like, where's your practice plan? And I said, it's in my head. Like, that's been doing this for a while now. And he's like, you're a teacher. Like, the teachers don't come into their classroom without lesson plans. And so from that day on, I always have a lesson plan for whatever I'm doing. Make my transitions strong and not waste time. I always tell my athletes, I don't want them to come over here and waste my time. So I'm not going to waste their time and, be organized and ready to go. And then I think, we put together over the years, you put together a playing system that works for you. I would say my playing system is very, rooted in Stanford women's side of water polo. But I've had a lot of influences with other coaches watching and respect that I have for what they do and always, like I said earlier, a growth mindset and try to pull from what they're doing. And, and I think just in my conference alone, I get challenged every day by, the coaches in my conference. I think, Dusty at Princeton, Derek at Princeton, Felix at Brown, You know, Cassie at Michigan, Jackie at Brown. Like, you know, we have a lot of really strong coaches. John McBride, Jay O'Neill. Like, I'll just name my whole conference so no one gets mad at me. But every day, you know, when I show up and have to compete and prepare for playing against them, they challenge me, whether they know it or not, to be the best I can. And I think that's a huge part of you know, being organized and trying to stay on top of things.
That's awesome. I know, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, both Cassie and Jackie were assistant coaches for you at one point.
Yeah. Cassie was here for 8 years and Jackie was here for 6 years. I'm very proud of them. You know, I think they're amazing young women, the way they see the game. You know, I think they each have different strengths in what they do. And, you know, I just had one other assistant leave to go to St. Mary's, and Jacob Castro, and he's going to be an amazing coach as well. You know, I'm very proud of the little tree we got going on over here at Harvard, and the things that they do, and they make me proud. And you know, they're great. That's
awesome. You're spreading your family's growing.
Yeah. It's gonna grow. It's growing. Yeah. It's pretty cool to see. You know, I mean, you know, I think when we started and Cassie got here, you know, she was just coming back from playing over in Europe and just finished her college career, and she came in here and really, her and I built this, and you know, won 3 championships. And when the second assistants came, you know, Jackie was one of my first calls, because you know, right before I hired Cassie, or right after I hired Cassie, Jackie came and introduced herself to me on a pool deck, and she looked me in my face and said, "I'm Jackie Pacino. I'm your next assistant coach." And I was like, okay. And that kind of stuck with me. And when we got it, I made a phone call, and the next thing you know, Jackie's here. You know, so I think, you know, I'm very proud of what we do. And I think the success we have is the assistants stay around. My assistants have stayed around for 3, 4, 8, 6 years, and having some continuity in what we're growing and building, having continuity with our athletes and all that, I think is really important to the success that we've had. What little success we've had, I'll say.
Well, I remember it was last year. It was very exciting to see, you know, everyone jump in the water. Very monumental moment, I'm sure it was for you.
That was a special championship. I think all my championships I remember vividly. We've won 4 since I've been here, and you know, I'm very proud of what we've built here. When I got here, the men's program had won 11 games combined over 2 years, and the women weren't much better. And we had some really great kids here that really worked hard, and you know, we've won, you know, 3 championships on the men, now 1 on the women, and we've had some big wins along the way. So I'm really proud of that. But you know, I spent a lot of time on the girls' side, on the women's side. You know, at Castellea School, where I was coaching high school. It's a small all-girls independent day school in Palo Alto. And then on the women's side at Stanford. You know, so to be able to finally get that championship on the women's side was kind of something that was special. And you know, that was a very special team. You know, they all, you know, the older girls came in through COVID, and you know, so they had to get through a lot, and I think we were really close a couple years, you know, leading up to that, and to finally kind of get over the hump against, you know, we had to run the gauntlet. Like, we had to come in and we had to beat Michigan in overtime, and then we had to beat Princeton in overtime. You know, I think it was just a testament, and I don't know if many people realize, like, we're coming out of spring break and we're about 3.5 weeks away from the CWPA championships, and the Collegiate pool goes down, and they have to drain the pool and change the water and bring it up to temperature. So we were on the road for 3 weeks. We practiced at 4 different pools. We barely had any big full pool water to scrimmage. It was a real testament to this team. And I remember saying to them, like, okay, we're going to do these little things every day in these small spaces, and we're going to be really good at doing them, and they're going to help us be better when we get to championship. And they got our pool ready, like up to, it was like 74 degrees the first day we got in it, and we played Iona, and then we had like 3 days of big water practice at Blodgett before we got to Providence for the CWPA championship. So I mean, that was a big rallying call when we were going into overtime against Michigan and going into overtime against Princeton. It was like, we've been through worse in the last 3 weeks. Like, let's just dig down deep and let's just do what we love and play water polo. So.
Wow, that's crazy. Quite the adventure you guys went on.
Yeah, it was insane, but it was a testament to that team and how much they stayed focused on what we were doing.
How do you go from come from that high? Are you guys coming in strong this season? Are we feeling good, or we?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's always weird for me to talk about it like that when we're in it, and people are like, "Hey, are you guys good?" Like, I think we're good. I don't know what anyone else thinks about us, but I mean, we've had some good wins. I really like this team. They're fun to come to work with every day. They work really hard. I think we're really talented. I think we could be a little stronger at some positions this year than we were last year. I think we're pretty deep. I can go 6 for 6 with this team. We had a big win at Princeton against Indiana a couple weeks ago. We've been 2 weeks in the top 10, and I think that's only the second time in program history where we've been there. We're off to the second greatest start in program history at 9-0, going into conference play. I'm really, really excited about this group. I think, we can do some things. We get really good goaltending. My deepest position is probably the defender position, which is really nice when you have 9 fouls, 9 exclusions you can work with there. And then my freshman class has brought a lot to the table. They've come in and they've really adapted well. And, my returners that weren't getting a ton of minutes last year really have stepped up and have done a good job of growing into different roles this year. So, we'll see. You're only as good as your next game. And, we have some tough games coming up, and, it's February, this all means nothing. You could go 0 and whatever and have a nice 3-game run at CWPA championships in Michigan and win a championship and be 3-30 and have a ring on your finger, so anything can happen.
Sure. Well, see what the next months bring, but best of luck with the season.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's I want to pivot a little bit and kind of go into more of the actual gameplay, the strategy, as well as tips you have for, how do you evaluate your team? How do you kind of see the strengths that they bring?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. One of my assistants is Zoe Banks, and she played for me. And I remember she came in and we were transitioning from men's season to women's season. And we were in one of our staff meetings, and I looked at her and I was like, "So what's the biggest aha that you have now that you're on this side?" I mean, she was a captain for me, 2-time captain and 3-time All-American. And she was like, "I didn't realize how much time you spend evaluating us." And, we're always evaluating in practice. And, once a week we have a meeting where we come in and the first thing we do is we put a ranking up, and each coach has an opportunity to say where they think everyone is in the ranking. And we literally rank them 1 through whatever number we have. And we make a ladder. And then from there, we start talking about what our rotations are going to look like for the week. And then we go through special team stuff, like what's our best 6-on-5 group? What if we're running this play? And then we go timeout plays. Who plays this position best on the timeout play? Then we'll go through our 5-on-6 group. And then if that person is out, here's the next group on 5-on-6. So we spend a lot of time. That meeting can take 2 to 2.5 hours during the week of just getting ready for the weekend. And we do it every week. And then I think having individual meetings with our athletes, talking to them every day, making sure they understand, clearly what their role is. If they don't understand what their role is, I make sure we're spending time so that they can figure out their role. And I think those are the biggest things that we do to try to kind of evaluate and get people put into the right position. And it'll change. Like, I don't have a starting group. I kind of went away from that a few years ago because, I say all the time, like, I can go out there and start the game at 56 years old, and I'm not going to be the reason we lose the game, right? You should want to be in at the end of the game when the money's on the line. You want to be in timeout plays. You want to be special teams. You want to be defense. Like, that's what you should be fighting for, not to be a starter. So we change our lines up almost weekly. Sometimes game to game we'll change like who's in. And so I think almost everybody has gotten a start this year on both the men's and the women's team. And I think that's been a big part of kind of getting people buying into what their roles are and understanding what they have to do, and not like I'm a starter.
Okay. You will do a lot of like evaluation with like who you're playing, depends on like who you'll put in, who you'll start, has a lot to do with.
Yeah. I mean, we spend a lot of time scouting. We have, a typical week for us is, so we'll play our games and I'll do my film workflow. And I spend time watching each game, pulling clips for my athletes that I want them to see, pulling clips for our film session, pulling clips for scouts for future games. And then I'll put together a film session. And then Monday morning when I wake up, I'll go through that film session again. And that's when I'll kind of clean it up and I'll put notes on it and diagrams. And then we'll come in before practice as a staff and meet and go through the film session and then talk about how we want to attack Monday's practice. And then Wednesday, we'll have our staff meeting and go through the rest of the week. And then we'll have our scout meetings. So we would have, in our staff meeting the week before, assigned scouts for the teams where future teams were playing for the staff to go through and write their scouts. And we do a pretty detailed scout where we talk about the important players, what their tendencies are, phases of the game, what they like to run, and what we want to run to kind of hopefully counter what they're doing. And then that's Wednesday. So we spend probably 3 hours with our staff meeting and going through scouts. And then we go through our line, I call it a lines meeting. And that's where we do that evaluation. So there's a lot of meetings during the week for us. And, I think sometimes our athletes think I just show up at practice time and put my whistle in my mouth and say, all right, here we go, let's go. But there's a lot that goes into the preparation of it.
Well, that's fair. I recently started, this is my first year coaching as well. I coached one of the club teams, and I think I didn't realize how much strategy goes in because I've never seen that side as well. So,
I mean, and I think that's what I love about my job and what makes it fun. And, I say, I'm playing chess all the time against the other coach. And especially in conference, you play a team 2 or 3 times, right? Like, you got to be thinking ahead. Like, do you want to show this? Are you saving this? And we talk about that, and I don't know if we do a good job at it, but we try, and we do think about those kinds of things,
For sure. I'm sure it's probably a guessing game with knowing what they're doing just as much evaluation of you guys, and always interesting to see how it plays out in the pool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, I know, I know everybody in our conference and outside of our conference are doing the same things and using, there's, I always get a call, or I'll make a call to get film on a team. And, we're always like, I have overnight, I have ESPN Plus, every once in a while I'll get the, whatever it is, that flow, whatever. And, CWPA TV, like, I watch games and streams and, just try to stay on top of like tendencies and, what players are doing and what they like to do. And, players do tip things. They are creatures of habit. And if you watch enough of them, especially on film, I love watching film when it's all broken down and I can just watch one phase of the game, or I can just like we'll have like one of our assistants go and tag a bunch of shots of one player, and then you can just watch back to back to back to back all their shots, and try to pick up tendencies for your goalie or goalies tipping stuff that they do. So it's, that's what makes it fun.
Definitely. So do you have any tips for people who are trying to maybe break into coaching, trying to break into college coaching?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I keep saying growth mindset, and I think that's so important. I think, I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel. I don't think anyone in water polo is reinventing the wheel. It's not that complicated of a sport. Like if it was rocket science, I definitely wouldn't be doing it. I'm not that smart of a person. So I think, talking to people, just talking water polo as much as you can, being organized, having a plan, like I have a system of play that we run, and we talk about it's not railroad tracks, it's a roadmap. And, it's very much, like we want to, I call it the circle of life, right? We're going to start with defense, and, we're going to hopefully get a stop. We're going to, I grew up watching, the Run TMC Lakers and or Warriors, and the Showtime Lakers, and how fast they played, and pushing tempo and transition. And so I like to play fast, and I like to push the speed. And so we're going to counter, and and then score a goal hopefully, and come back and get another stop. And I think having that kind of thought, how we want to do things, and then breaking it down. When do you want to press? When do you want to be in a zone, and why? And if the ball's here and the center's here, how do you want to attack? And offensively, like we think about breaking the shot clock down into sections, and that once the ball turns over, 6-7 seconds you're in counter, and 4 or 5 seconds you're in early offense, and the rest of the clock you're just you're running your offense, and thinking about how you want to attack those things. So I think really being organized and writing down what your thoughts are on how you want the game to be, and then really organizing your practice plan, and not be all over the place. Like I like to build, start with something small and broken down, and build it up into the final section. I'm not a big, huge scrimmage coach. Like we'll play some quarters, like we call them 5-minute quarters, and we'll play 1 or 2 of them a day. But we're not doing tons and tons of scrimmaging. We're doing more of working on individual skills and fundamental skill bases, and talking about it broken down so that we can have that section of the pool really good, and then move on to another section of the pool. So I think for young coaches, I would just say, like, just be organized and ask questions to older coaches. I think that's something that development of coaches is something we don't do amazingly in our sport. I think we're trying to do a good job. I think USA Water Polo has got some coaching stuff, and I think the College Coaches Association is doing some stuff. But I say, if you're in the Boston area and you want to come watch a practice, just email or reach out to me. You're more than welcome to come watch a practice and sit in on a meeting and see how we do things. Like, I think those are the biggest things. Does that answer your question? I talk. I like to.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's some great advice. And I think I found, while we may not have all the resources out there to like train coaches, everyone has always been very, welcoming, willing to answer questions, help them out. And that's something I love about the water polo community, is that everyone wants to talk about the sport.
Yeah. And I think, that's what's great about being a small little niche Olympic sport, right? Like, the community is small, and most people know most people. And, I think most people want to see our sport grow, and I think you asked about how to get into college coaching. I mean, you need to be an assistant coach. I mean, I was very lucky, and it was a different time where I got hired right away into this, and you see it. Brian Flax went from high school to coaching at Stanford, and so you do see it, but it's not something that happens every day. You're seeing more of the assistant coaches that are coming from these programs, and these successful programs that are getting these jobs. And so it's finding a place where you can go and be an assistant coach and learn how to coach the college game, learn how to recruit, learn the rules. I think that's the other big thing that people don't understand. There's a million rules that we have to follow. Like, not only is there the NCAA rule book, but then I got to follow the Ivy rule book too. And, and like, I spend more time, recruiting and working on budgets and putting together practice schedules and stuff like that than actually working with the team. And so I think learning all that stuff to be successful. And you got to be willing to move, I think. You got to go where the job is if this is what you want to do. I think that's, there's a lot of assistant coaching jobs that open up, and, not always are we able to fill them. So you got to be willing, to do it and, take a leap of faith.
That's great. That's good to hear. I think you don't hear often a lot about just coaching jobs in general. So keeping an eye out for those.
Yeah. I mean, I think like there was a ton of I just hired two positions in the last, month and a half. I lost two staff members right in December, and so that was, But I think there's been a few that jobs that are open, and I think that's grad assistant jobs are great if you want to continue your education too, and so they're out there. You just I think the College Coaches Association does a good job of promoting where those are. I think Ed at the CWPA, he posts everything. He finds it. I don't know how he does it, but he'll find it and he'll get it out there. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, I don't put that out there yet.
I'm not ready.
Yeah,
he's good at he's pretty on top of it.
Yeah. There's no other questions. I feel like I don't even know if this is helpful.
I think it's great. So,
Okay.
and I appreciate it. So, I mean, see if anyone else has any questions. But now, is there anything else you want to tell us? Is there anything you feel like has been a key to your success as a coach, or just your enjoyment of being a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very lucky every day. I say I get paid to be a big kid coming to work, and I love that. I think I take myself serious, but I don't take myself too serious because I'm coaching a sport, and I think I take being a role model and a mentor to my athletes very seriously, and I want them to be successful. So I think that's an important piece to it, and it drives me every day. So.
That's awesome. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thank you. We'll kind of wrap up. We'll get you back to your schedule.
Everyone just took off right now. I
I know. It must be everyone's bedtime. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for the answers, and I'm excited to see you guys play this year.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, these are great. Keep doing them.
I will.
All
Awesome.
right.
Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Take care.